So at the risk of bringing in a quite consulting-y framework, I'm going to point you to a value stick here, right, which is basically a kind of a conceptual map. This kind of vertical line here is just a price point or dollars, and then we have three levels. There is the cost to us, the vendor, to provide this. Then there is the price, which is the price that the customer pays. And then there is the willingness to pay, which is the customer's willingness to pay for that product, which is going to be at least partially informed by the value that they are receiving, right? So between the willingness to pay and the price, this is the customer value surplus. This is kind of like the extra value that they get because their willingness to pay, what they would pay for it, is higher than the actual price that they paid. So it's a net gain for them. And as you, the vendor, the value surplus that you get is the difference between the price that you got and the cost that it cost you to provide it. So there's going to be a split of the overall value across these two buckets, right? With the overall value being everything between the cost and the willingness to pay. So different scenarios, if you were to say, well, your argument to the customer for a price increase is that we provide more value now, nothing else included, then you're in a situation where the willingness to pay for the customer potentially rises if you can convince them that they receive all of that value. So their customer value surplus has increased, but of course yours hasn't. So if they believe it, you might be able to get them to believe, hey, look, your value surplus has gone up, mine hasn't. Feels like you should give me some of your value surplus, but that's kind of difficult argument to make. They might push back on that. Also, as I mentioned earlier, even if you're including new features and new capabilities within your product, or giving them access to something, unless you can actually show that they're benefiting from that, they might be able to just push back and say, well, I'm not using it, therefore I don't think I should pay for it. So it's not terrible as a rationale, but it's not complete. It's probably going to be quite difficult if that's your only lever that you're pulling. The other scenario is you say that our costs went up. So in that scenario, right, your cost line has gone up, but the price and the willingness to pay have stayed the same. So your value surplus has actually shrunk considerably, whereas the customers has stayed the same. So now you're in a position where you can say, look, I cannot afford to continue to provide you the value that you're receiving at the current price I'm doing because all my costs have risen. So it's fair that we raise the price so that we can split the value a bit more equally. That rationale does tend to work pretty well. Customers can get that, they can grab onto it. It's pretty well received. Even better is the idea that you use cost as the basis for it. We are charging you more because our costs have gone up, but also at the same time, a lot of these costs have been invested to give you more value. So costs have gone up, but you have the potential to get more value now because we've built A, we've built B, we've built C, you have access to all this stuff now. So that extra value is not the reason we're charging you more, but it's a reason that you can feel better about paying more now because we have more value. So you've kind of married the cost and the value together there in the same narrative, done so in a way that's going to be far more palatable to the customers. And then the last one here, scenario 4, this is a slightly different track. This is more of a right sizing argument. But if you go down that track we were talking about of actually the initial deal that we gave you, the price to value relationship was off. We didn't charge you as much as we should have done. If you can sort of show that other customers now who look the same size, same scale, same kind of segment are generally paying significantly more, then you can say that, like, look, we did this, you got a great deal for several years. That's great. Happy to give it to you. You've been a loyal customer. We've saved you a lot of money in that period because we haven't raised your prices. But right now, this is generally what other people are paying. And to be fair to our other customers, we need to move you to something that's more in keeping with everybody else is paying. So those are 4 scenarios. I will not suggest for a second that any of these methodologies is foolproof in every single situation, or that every customer is the same, because as we've talked about, they're different, and some of these some customers will accept just the value, some customers will reject all of these. But really sort of leaning into that idea of let's couch it around fairness and use the levers that we can to promote fairness are going to result in far more effective messaging for the customer than just thinking about any of those individual components. Make sense? All right. I'll also actually, so this is, I'm going to call this the Amy slide now, actually, because this is the thing that you just brought up, Amy, which I think is a great one. The idea here now is to think about, called it the call your bluff slide. It's a little bit of if somebody's really price sensitive, then put your money where your mouth is and show me that you're really price sensitive and willing to do whatever it takes to get a lower price. So rather than just saying to a customer, look, we're increasing your price, take it or leave it, which would be this option here, right? We're just going to increase the price that you pay for your existing product. You could also, as one example, say, or you can continue paying what you're paying, and we're going to give you some truncated value product, right? So maybe this is a lower tier offering of what you're currently giving. It's got something critical taken out. So the price to value relationship is still the same as in your price increase scenario, but you've just done it in a different way. So really, if the customer truly cares about price more than everything else, they have an option now. But if they care about all the value that you're actually providing, and they do care about the value of the product, chances are they will go ahead and pay that price increase. And of course, you have to be very thoughtful about releasing this. You don't want to make that lower tier offering too valuable so that a lot of customers end up taking that. You'll end up not getting much of a price increase at all, but just giving it makes customers feel better about going to that price increase because they had a choice, right? It wasn't that you were forcing something on them. They actually had some options. And I think that's exactly the same principle that you were talking about, Amy, right? Which is to say, like, look, you can pay this price increase, or you can give us something of value to us in exchange for keeping the price the same level. So many different things you can do there, but testimonials, sometimes signing up for a longer contract could be a way of doing that as well. There's lots of different levers that you can pull.
One that we did recently was we actually had that a particular customer come and participate as a keynote speaker in one of our customer events. So it was more of like a prospect/customer event. So then that was a way to evangelize for us as well.
That's a great one. Yep.
One of the things I was going to say real quickly, James, is sometimes this reveals a kind of.
Oh, you're on mute, Ryan. You hit the mute button.
Sorry. Sometimes this reveals a difficult conversation with product and sales teams on maybe there is a customer that we're selling to that we shouldn't be, right? Because they're not the right use case. And we've been solving that through price, right? Historically. When in reality, we need to think about maybe an alternative pricing and packaging motion for those customers, or make a decision that those aren't customers that are strategic to us, and therefore we're willing to call their bluff, right? To the slide that we have here. Yep. But I think this is an exercise where implementing the standard kind of price capabilities reveals a lot of conversations that maybe shouldn't have been that aren't happening, that should be happening with the different functional teams, right? And that's one of them.
Yeah. 100% agree, Ren. Any more interesting give-gets, actually? This is always one of the things I'm most interested to hear, actually, creativity in this area. I'll share one that I heard recently. I don't know if you guys have read Chris Voss's book. Chris Voss is like an ex-hostage negotiator for the FBI. He has a book, which is actually, if you're looking for negotiations book, it's a really good book to read. It's called Never Split the Difference. But he talks about he negotiated with a magazine who he was working with who wanted negotiation training. So they were working with him. This was not a price increase. This was just general pricing. But he was building his business at the time. So he gave them a discount on the price if they would put him on the cover of the magazine. And it was kind of his target segment. So he was there. He got a lot of publicity from it, sort of put him around. And that was a great example of a value trade, right? Because he probably got something that was so valuable to him, he never would have been able to purchase that, but it was something that they could give him cheaply, that he was willing to drop his price a little bit in order to receive.
Yeah, we do something similar super regularly. To add a clause for speaking at an event, giving us quotes, case studies, blah blah blah. And so even if we can't get the full price increase when we get a new deal, we'll very regularly tie whatever price again to that extra clause that gives us a little bit of something back on the marketing side.
Yeah, great. All right. right, let me stop sharing. Let's go back. Cool. All right, so moving on then. So I think we've covered messaging. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about was enablement of sales teams as well, right? We've talked about it. Everything has to flow through the sales organization, you know, whatever that looks like for you. It looks different in different organizations and different types. But if your sales team are not effectively enabled to be able to go out and run these price increases, even if you plan them well, then it's all going to get lost, right? Within that, and you're either going to not get the upside that you should have got, or you're going to end up with some churn that you certainly would not want. So a few best practices to think about for enabling your sales team there. So firstly, provide them with any information you have that supports the view that customers will or should pay more, right? So if as part of doing this, you went out and got willingness to pay data, share it with your sales team. So many organizations do that and use it to drive the strategic decision making, but don't pass the underlying information to their sales teams because they think it's too detailed. They need to know that if they're going to feel good about being able to go out and push through these price increases, it is incredibly helpful for them to see the data that says that customers will pay more than they're currently paying. So willingness to pay research, any estimates on value that you have, or any sort of value differentiation that shows that they're better than competition, or just competitive pricing that shows that your pricing relative to your value is better or comparable to your competitors. Super helpful. Secondly, give them the messaging to use. So don't rely on them to make it up from scratch. Give them the detailed messaging that they should be using to justify and support those pricing increases. So, ideally, you don't want to give them a script that they can't change, but give them a template script which has all the different points that they can customize a little bit. Will help them give the messaging that you want them to use and make sure they position everything the right way. And then with that, give them clear rules and options, right? So thinking about those, we were talking about earlier, those target prices versus the walkaway prices, really helpful clarity to be able to have. If they have other options, those give gets, these are other things that you can offer in trade for a certain number of percentages of price increase, lower tier versions, etc. Make sure they have access to all of that and they know what they can be doing. It'll make them more effective in having those conversations. When they're in positions where it's a really big price increase, train them on having those conversations. Don't let their first crack of the whip be in front of a real customer. Do role playing, give them chances to go through it so that they can build their skills and feel good about it. And also, we would say incentivize them as well on putting through the price increases. And that doesn't mean just kind of give them their standard rep commission rate on those extra couple of percentages they give. It means pay them disproportionately for getting those extra few percentages, because it makes a huge amount of difference to you and the business when you think of the recurring value of those extra few percentages. And sales teams are always going to think, they're always going to believe it's more likely than you will that the customers will churn if they go for it. So they've really got to be incentivized to push as high as they possibly can. So if you know that if they're actually hitting the walkaway price, they're doing so because they really don't think they can get anything higher. It's not just because they gave up and it wasn't worth it to push. So super important. All right, very quickly at the end then, I know we're running out of time. Let's maybe have a look at these couple of examples of some public messaging here. I know these public examples are always the B2C ones, but I do think they're useful in helping us think about the messaging. So you can see Spotify here. This is a note that they sent out relatively recently to put through a price increase. What did they do well? What could they have done better?
The language is very clear up front. I mean, you know exactly what's happening.
Yep, that's right. They didn't beat about the bush, right? It's in the first line of the email, the price is going up.
They've included what they're going to be doing. So instead of saying, I did this for you over the last, year, you owe me this, it's we're doing this so we can actually invest more on features to bring to you.
Yeah. Definitely agree, Amy, right? I like this second paragraph. I actually think overall this is a pretty good note, right? I like the second paragraph because they talk about we're increasing it so that we can continue to invest. And of course, investing means costs going up, right? So they're talking about the fact that the cost going up, but they're also then immediately tying that cost to the value because they're going to be pushing for features and overall experience. So it's our cost is going up. It's going up in service of generating more value for you. What about getting ahead of it? Did they give notice? We don't know exactly when this note was sent, I suppose. But
I believe it was in the month before the new billing cycle, so it wasn't much notice, but probably sufficient notice for $1, at least for that upcoming cycle.
not a huge price increase, it's true. But I think a little more notice probably would have been nice. I think everybody would have appreciated that.
Yeah.
And just to round out here, I'll say the bottom here, look who it's from. It's from the Spotify team, which does feel a bit, impersonal. So I think that could have been handled better.